All right, so I'll be talking about migrating safely to React. I've been here in Amsterdam a few days. It's been really fun sightseeing, great city. So the place that I'm staying at, they have this image sitting on the mantle. I thought, wow, looks like my hair, it's like my glasses, beard, and I have a shirt like this. So I guess the lesson here is that if you want to work in Silicon Valley, you need to look like this. In all seriousness, no. Let's get some more diversity and make sure this isn't the case. Okay, so a little bit about me. I'm a UI engineer at PayPal. I work on the Send Money team. I've been there about 2 years, and I live in San Jose. And so and I'll be talking about the lessons that we learned at PayPal as we were trying to gradually migrate, because as you said, we have a few 100 million users, and we can't really risk breaking things just because we want to jump onto something else. So let's talk about some history. So in 2014, when I joined the PayPal team, Send Money looked something like this. Looks like it hasn't changed much since 1998. And on the back end, some C++, some XML. On the front end, not a great dev experience. At this time, it took 6 weeks to ship out even just a small content change. Terrible for the user, terrible for the developer. So my team's charge was to roll out a new and a better experience. And a few weeks after I joined, we rolled this out. Modern stack, a lot more modern UI. We could roll something out same day or within a few days. So huge win all around. This worked really well for us for a long time with this stack until we had a hackathon. I said, well, what would we do now if we could make our experience even better? We said, okay, let's try this. And since we have a lot of users, we have to do A/B testing and be really careful about things like that. So we were now at a point where we had different templates that we needed to use, even though the underlying model layer was the same. And so we got in this funny place where we started running into a lot of problems. Things started getting ugly at this point. Some of the pain that we felt was that there were way too many abstraction layers. And when I say this, I mean, if you see a bug on the page, maybe the amount is wrong. In order to track down where that value is coming from, you have to start at the template, then go to the model, then go to the server-side controller, then go to the server-side model, and then see where the REST call is. So once you try and go through 6 or 7 of these layers of abstraction, it's really easy to get lost. It's really confusing, and this is a really bad way to do things. We had really low confidence. We had really low confidence that if we would fix something over here, that it would stay fixed and that it would break something over in this other file. So this also very bad. We want to know when we fix things that will stay fixed. And we had a lot of really difficult state bugs. Bugs like, on one page, we would change the currency to euros. We'd go forward, you change something else in the UI, you go back, and all of a sudden the currency has changed. I remember when I first joined the team, having to spend several days tracking down a bug and going through each line of code and thinking, okay, where is this getting messed up? And it's an extremely frustrating place to be. And who here has ever dealt with a bug like that? Okay, a handful. Makes you want to rip your hair out, right? Okay, so let's pause from our narrative for a second and think, okay, how did we get in this state? How did things get so bad? Well, version 1 of this, what's always the main goal with version 1? It's just ship it, right? We need to get this out the door. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's good enough. We have a deadline. Let's ship this. And so as a result of that, maintainability is usually a lower priority. And I think that's okay, especially for version 1. But what automatically happens then is your complexity of your code base rises over time as you're just tacking on fixes and new features, and you're moving too quickly to do things properly and carefully. So there is a great talk that talks about this phenomenon called Simple Made Easy by Rich Hickey. Who here has seen this talk? Okay. It's a great talk if this is something that you're worried about. Rich Hickey is the creator of the Clojure programming language, which is great at, they think a lot about state and how to manage state well and predictably. So he shows this diagram where he explains that if your focus is on easy solutions, on just getting things done quickly, you start out really fast. You can knock out features really quickly, but over time, your momentum and your velocity starts slowing down, where at the end, you can't even ship features very quickly because your code base is so complicated and everything is so intertwined and intermingled and coupled that even asking for a simple feature, you say, well, this is going to take me 2 weeks because I need to untangle this piece from the rest of the app, and I don't know if I change this, if it's going to break all these pieces over here. So the alternate approach is to focus on something that's simple, which is harder to do, takes more effort, and you start out slower, but you have sustainable momentum over time. But I think it's important to remember that if you're just doing something short-lived, if your main goal is just hacking something, then this doesn't really matter and you can just always go for easy. But if you're worried about maintaining something over a long period of time, simple is really the way to go. So the takeaway here is that for me, code is simple if I can look at it and if my coworkers can look at it and say, okay, I know what this is going to do. I can predict with high confidence what's going to happen with the given inputs here and how this will break if it breaks. Hopefully it doesn't, but what the side effects are, in what ways it could break. Because if I can't look at code and predict what's going to happen, then I have no hope of having any sort of reliability in my app or in my code and not having just crazy weird bugs because I just have no idea what's going to happen. And this is a really bad place to be in. So the way we've been doing it on our team lately is the best way to catch things like this is really in code reviews. And that's my opportunity to say, okay, I don't understand what's going on here. Please walk me through this. And if they walk me through it and it's still confusing, there's this piece is talking to this and this, then we push back and say this needs to be simpler because we can't put it in like this because this will cause problems over time. So let's get back to our narrative now. So this time we were in a really, really bad place. We started looking around. We said, okay, what frameworks are out there? What solutions out there that can help us reduce our complexity and keep things simple? We briefly looked at Ember, tried out one or two feature, and then there are some things we liked about it. I said, okay, now let's try React. So the first thing we wanted to do is to move over one feature to React. This is where React really shines. One thing they've really nailed at Facebook is how to gradually move something over, because I think they understand that most large companies with their use cases can't just wholesale move from one thing to another. And for us at PayPal, that's just not an option. That's a non-starter. So we had a few blockers in this, IETN and things like that. But I talk about that in my other talk, which I gave a year ago. So if you want more details on that and things like culture, go watch that talk. So this is our flow at the time. We have the first page, which is the person you want to send money to and the amount. And at this point, we are looking for what's the least important thing in this flow. What's the thing that if I change and I break, it's not going to cause me to get fired or people to come yell at me. I probably wouldn't get fired if I break this, but if you're irresponsible enough, you will get fired. So this is the first page. Then the second page, we have some funding instruments. You choose where the money comes from, and then there's this great notes field. The notes field is probably the least important thing of this flow, because if I'm going to break something, I don't want to break who you're sending money to or the amount. Because if you send 10 euros to your friend and we charge you 1,000 euros, that is a huge deal. And we just can't do that. So if we're going to mess up anything in this flow, it's going to be the notes field. If that optional field is gone, not a huge deal. A lot of people probably won't even notice. So this is also great because you see here it's got some IETN. It's got some JavaScript resize functionality. And so this is really a great candidate. So I spent a weekend and I moved this over to React, and then within a few weeks it got merged after some back and forth, but some lessons learned here. React really helped and simplified our view. Things became more predictable, we were able to move from 2 files because we had a backbone view file and a template file down to 1 file, which is always great. It was a quick win. It was pretty easy. Here's something really important. We have to test our entire pipeline as we're experimenting with new things. It's not enough just to try it out on staging and say, okay, this is good enough, because things will always break, especially the first time. They will usually break in prod. So for us, we pushed this out, and there was a problem with Akamai, and so the IETN for that React piece wasn't working, and so we immediately broke it. So that's why it's good to manage your risk and choose the least important part of your flow and to push it out and observe it in the wild. And this is really a point for us to stop and evaluate and look, okay, our goal right now isn't migration. Our goal is how can we reduce pain, and this gives us an opportunity to see how this lines up with our overall goals of reducing complexity and keeping things simple. So at this point, we looked and said, okay, we really like what React is doing here and what it's giving us. It's reducing it a little bit, but it's still not doing enough for us. So what's next? What's beyond the view? And at this point, we started looking and thinking, okay, how can we take this big, complicated app and break it down into manageable pieces? So as we were thinking about this, we thought, okay, the pieces really are, we have the view layer, which we just talked about. We have the routing layer. Who here does not know what the routing layer is when I talk about that? Who here does know? Okay. So about half of you don't know, so I'm just going to explain it. So when we talk about the routing layer, we talk about, so this is a single page application. It means when you transition between pages, there's not a page refresh. It's faster, it feels smoother. Most apps nowadays have it. But the routing layer is the code that handles these transitions, that basically says, at this URL, run this code. And then when the URL changes to this thing, then run this code over here. So this is the routing layer. Then our data layer, which is things like backbone models, where we manage all of our state. Now the view layer is, at this point, pretty much a solved problem. We know how to move it over. The rest of the team can do that as they see fit, and that's great. So let's talk about the routing layer. I'll say, okay, where is the code that tracks to this URL so I can find that easily? In our current iteration of code, that was really hard. And so this really gives us a great opportunity to make things better, reduce complexity at the routing layer, and make things simpler. So let's see what our app currently looks like. We have right now it's all backbone. You see the routing layer at the top. Then when you choose the send URL, it renders those features in that part of the tree. So the general wisdom with React as you're trying it out is to start at the very bottom and take one small feature on a page like we did and move it over to React. Then you do the siblings, and then you slowly move up the tree. But this doesn't really solve our routing layer issue. So instead, let's focus on so instead we decided to focus on the routing layer. So this is quite a bit simplified, but this is kind of what it looked like. We had one file with 2 basic routes. We had the default route, which loads the show transfer function. Then we have this hash here, which says any URL with 1 or 2 parts in it will also load the show transfer function and pass in these parameters. So in our case, type is things like buy, send, request, and actions, things like preview, send, success, things like that. So then we also had this interesting function which had a lot of very imperative things in it, like ShowView, get path, and again, much simplified. So if you look at this, which function do you think is in charge of loading the view? Do you think it's ShowView? Yes? That's what I would think. But in fact, it was load scripts. And at this point, you think, you're just like, what? This is kind of the point where you're just really mad, and you, it's just really frustrating right now, right? Because this is not a good place to be in. Let's go back to this. So a lot of very confusing things here. And so we were able to move to React Router, rip this file out completely, no more of this custom craziness because React handles all of this for you automatically. And so we're much happier there. So afterwards, the routing layer looks like this. You pull in a container, you have a route, and you say, okay, at this route, load this component. Okay, so now the routing layer has been moved over to React. And let's focus on the next piece down, which is the send layer, or the send component, or that URL slug. So the first thing you'll probably notice here is, why does it return null? The reason is that the child of this layer is still backbone components. So we can't just shove React in there because there's no children. So what we've done here is, when this loads, or when there's any changes made to any of the props, we call this show backbone view function, which sets up some basic properties, and then it reaches into backbone land and says, okay, now render this part of the backbone code, which will render the view. So what we've essentially done is we've built a bridge from the new world to the legacy backbone code. And this is really great because when we don't need this anymore, we can burn that bridge and move on. So what we've done now is the very top of our app is React, and the very bottom is. So as we move up, we can just make the whole thing React gradually and move on. So what that would look like is we move from this to this. And maybe we don't even need this file, and we can flatten it down even more. This is a really great migration path for the team, and we've been really happy with it because this allows us to use the new fancy React stuff and the backbone stuff at the same time and slowly migrate over one piece at a time. So let's talk about this took about 3 weeks. The first view feature took 1 week, and this part took about 3 weeks. So now we can easily match the URL to the code that executes. We've reduced complexity again, which fits with our overall goal, and we have a great migration path for a given URL. Let's talk about the data layer. So for us, it's backbone models and collections. It's pretty complicated. Who here has simple models and simple collections and simple backbone files and all those things? Anybody? This seems to get, okay, one person, great. I'm going to come talk to you afterwards and you can teach me. These things easily get really complicated, right? I mean, that's kind of what happens. So most of our state pain seems to come from the models. So what options do we have? Can we do what we did with the view and just migrate over one feature, including all of the model? Well, if it were self-contained, that would be really awesome. But is that what we have? No, usually we have things like this, right? Where one piece of the data talks to this other piece of the data over here, and just everything is so intertwined that it's very hard to separate and say, okay, I'm just going to move this one piece over to something like Redux. It's just really painful. So instead, it's easier for us to take a new feature and move that over. I'm going to do a quick demo now with one hand. So we decided that we wanted to build. There we go. Oh, you can't see that. Okay. So we decided that we wanted to, so we have our normal send money flow, and then we also have a, we wanted to have this new feature where we have a calculator. You can say, I want to send money to Argentina or Japan. And let's say, I want to see how much it would cost me to send $300. And this is fake data since it's running on localhost. But so this, fairly simple UI, but there's a lot of state things going on. And so in Backbone land, it is incredibly difficult to visualize what happens with my internal state as I'm changing all these things. So because of that, tracking state problems is really, really complicated. But this is something that Redux is really, really good at. I'm gonna zoom it all the way. Okay, so Redux is really, really great at this. And so let's look at some of the what Redux gives us here. A great way to see what's happening in your application when you're using Redux. Who here is using Redux? Okay, so about half or so. Great. Is to just log all of the actions. So if I change this, I can now see that I have updated the URL, that I've changed the origin amount field, that I've made an AJAX call, which requests the destination amount, that on success, I've now received the destination amount, and as part of that same call, I've received the fee amounts. And so this is really, really great because I can come in here and I can see, okay, what was the state previously, and how did this action of what data came through with this action, and then after, how did this affect the state of my application? So this is a really, really great way of immediately finding where did my state go wrong. If there's a bug, this is the first place that I go and I see, okay, the amount happens to be wrong. If it's wrong here, it means it was a server-side problem. If it's not wrong here, it means it's a client-side problem. What used to take me hours in tracking down and figuring out how my state went wrong now takes me minutes. This has been huge for us. We are so happy with Redux, and we are so happy with this. This has solved a lot of our state pain points with new features. Now back to this. Okay, and so that works great with new features, and we're really happy with it. But what about the old data? This is where things get a little bit more complicated, right? So for new features, it was a huge win, but for old features, it's a larger time investment because everything's so tightly coupled and tangled, and it's greater risk for that same reason. And we need a lot more testing and QA because, once again, tracking state and all the edge cases, it's just a lot more complicated. So what we've done on our team is we've used things like hackathons as opportunities, and as we want to redo the flow and redo parts of the flow, we'll say, okay, we'll leave this old thing here, and then as we build something new, we're going to build the new thing entirely in React and Redux, and then we'll do A/B testing and lots of QA, and then we'll just drop off the old thing. And so that's kind of what we've been doing, and it's kind of working, but okay, so that leads me to my final point. So it's only been 2 years since we chose our initial stack, and now we're already wanting to move to a brand new stack. So a question we have to ask ourselves is, how do we optimize for future change? How do we reduce the cost of experimentation and migration? And at this time, I found a great quote by Michael Feathers where he says, he wrote a book called Working with Legacy Code. The quote is, "You have to build a barrier between yourself and the framework." So what does he mean here? This is how I interpret it. Use as much vanilla JavaScript as possible. Now, don't misunderstand me. Still use React. Still use React Router and things like Redux. These are great abstraction, but especially when it comes to business logic, try and keep it framework agnostic and untangled from your framework. So let's look at a quick example of what that would look like. So we have a Backbone file here for the notes widget. It handles the resizing and things like that. What are actually the important parts here? So one, we have the events, and two, we have the resize business logic. The only thing that's going to change here is the event logic, right? So what if we take our business logic and we just move it into a utility instead? Now we can call this from a Backbone file. We can call this from a React file. This will be future-proof as we decide to migrate to other frameworks. This is also easier to test because it's not tightly coupled with a certain framework. And the reality is that if we don't build a barrier, even with our new React code, in 2 years, our React code is just gonna be just as painful and as hard to migrate as our backbone code is now. So we have to build these barriers. We can't just say, okay, now let's just move everything over, because we'll have the same problems. So in conclusion, because I'm out of time, make sure we solve real problems. Everything that we have, React, Webpack, Babel, all these things are really, really exciting. And I think it's very easy to be tempted to say, okay, I just want to use Redux in my application. I just want to use this. But the solutions first approach leads to JavaScript fatigue. And we've all heard so much of this, we're all fatigued by it, right? So I think the key here is that we think of problems first and not solutions first. What pain am I solving? What problems am I solving? If I focus on solutions first, I'm just going to make everybody on my team mad. And I'll quit with an anecdote, which is on my last team, we saw these articles about, oh, you don't need jQuery anymore. And so I thought, okay, let's just drop jQuery and we'll start using everything vanilla, and we'll have one small util, which is Ajax. And I went around and talked to the team about it, and they all said, please don't make us move off of jQuery. We're overwhelmed with the current stack. We've already had so much we've had to learn. And I thought, okay, I'm not actually solving any real pain points here. I need to drop this. So the principles that we've learned here are really about solving problems. If you don't have pain, then don't make your team suffer. Let's explore and understand the problem, then apply the solution. Thank you.